Hi, I'm Richard Rogers, and I absolutely hope that you enjoy today's spiritual message. You know, we at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center are committed to helping people live better lives. We're going to provide you tools over and over, spiritual tools that allow you to live your best possible life. And if you want to leave a donation to continue to allow the work that we do to support other people just like you, we say thank you. Thank you for your generosity, because this ministry is committed to making the world a better place.
So have you noticed in your life there are themes? Like there may be a theme in your life that is something that comes around and again and again. And in the theme, you kind of see your own progress. You see your own evolution. You see that every time this theme comes around in your life, because many people look at life as a straight line, but reality, life's kind of hopefully an upward spiral, right? And in this upward spiral, you come back to issues or themes over and over again, and you get to kind of see how you're doing with them, you know? And if you look at your life, I think you'd probably see some, not that any of us have issues, but you might, right? You might see some issues that you've had, and that the way you dealt with them when you were 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 70 or 1,000, like, has evolved, right? Can everybody see your own growth at some level? One of the things for me that is one of the issues that's been a constant reoccurring theme in the work that I do is about helping people access the best that is within them. And that whole idea of how do you get the best out of yourself, right? Because as a manager, you know, one of your jobs as a manager is trying to get the best out of others. And so, you know, we tend to focus on how do I manage the people around me in such a way that I get the best out of them. And that's all good. That's wonderful, right? But the thing that really interests me is how do you self-manage, right? How do you manage yourself in such a way that you're really getting the best out of you? Because there seems to be such a tendency in the world not to play full out, because you're the only one that knows how much more you have within you. One of the things that happened when I first came to this ministry back in '91 is, you know, if you were here at that point, we had the office was in a house, and it was kind of a lot of dark wall wood paneling in the house where the office is, where the bookstore was. And where my office was, it said senior minister. And I was like 33, you know. I didn't really feel like a senior minister, right? I felt like a baby minister who was doing the best he could, right? So at one point, and on my door it said senior minister. So at one point, I popped off the senior minister thing, and I had somebody engrave a name thing that said coach, right? Because I really felt like I was more of a coach than a senior minister. Because a senior minister sounded like somebody who was like me now, right? Like, right? Not like me, whatever it was 100 years ago, right? So, and I really love that idea, because there is something that just really intrigues me about coaching people, even before it was a term, like to really coach people on bringing out their best. So that's where we're going tonight. We're going to talk about you self-managing, you bringing out your best. Because the reality is, you're the only one that knows how fully you're playing the game of life. You're the only one that knows, are you playing it out at 20%, 30%, 80%, 100%? You're the only one that knows. And to the level you play at life tends to be the level the life comes back to you, right? So as you give, so shall you receive, right? And what's interesting about life, there's going to be a couple of interesting, I hope there's a couple of interesting things tonight about life. What's interesting about life is nobody outside of you really often calls you out as much as you could call yourself out. Sometimes we have really special people in our life who really see us for who we are, and they can call us out in a way it's like, oh, they got my number. They just know who I am. But most of this actually has to be self-generated, where we actually have to decide that we're going to be 100% honest with ourselves and say, I'm really only doing this at 60%. I remember somebody asked me one time how much I was playing at life, and I just said out loud, 50% with a little bit of charm. I didn't say a lot of charm. I just said a little bit of charm. I don't have a lot, but I had a little bit, right? And I don't think I realized how much more was in me, right? That 50% of charm was getting everything I wanted, but not really. Because I never really felt the fullness of me. I never really got to know the fullness of me. So tonight, what we're going to look at is not just how big you're playing, but how much are you able to tap into the infinite reservoir of God within you and bring it into manifestation as you, right? Because that's why we all came, right? We came into the world to give expression to God. Like there's so much God in each one of us, and we're here to give expression to that. And we can either kind of dumb it down and play a little bit, or we can be interested in what it would look like if we played full out, if we gave it all out and really looked at what that would look like to be fully present in the grandeur of who we are. Because it's hard to be a Christ being. It's hard to be an enlightened being and know that you're just living at 20%. It's like, well, then why? Like, what's the fear? What's the thing? What's the story? What's the drama that keeps you that dialed down? And if you don't feel like life's challenging enough for you to bring your full game, then we got to change the game you're playing. Because the game you're playing isn't big enough for your soul any longer. Are you with me? Are we going? That's where we're going. Great. Okay, good. All right. So let's begin tonight by asking the question, so who do you work for? Great. We've got 3 gods. Because one of the things I want you to really see is that I think everything changes when mentally and emotionally you actually decide that you're working for something bigger than your employer. Even if you're self-employed. I really want you to see that your life is your mission. And I believe that your mission is to fully express all that's within you, to play at the full extent of who you are, right? And this series that we're doing on Mastering Money, the premise is, as we've talked about, is I serve God, money serves me. And I think when we keep that order, that priorities, everything begins to make sense in our life. That we're 100% about serving God in the greatest possible way. Because that is the only thing that will give expression to all that's within us. And then when we're playing it a full out, then we're open and willing to receive all that the universe has to give to us, right? Then that's the overflowing goodness of God, right? And money is just a part of that. It's not the whole story, but it's definitely a worthy portion of the story. Right? That I am open and receptive to all the good that God has for me. Together? I am open and receptive to all the good God has for me. Let's say it one more time like we actually mean it. I am open and receptive to all the good that God has for me. Okay? So, to master money requires that you master yourself. Does everybody see that? Right? And mastering yourself really requires that you master your fears. And for most of us, we have a fear in lack and scarcity. And the other fear that we really have is the fear that if we gave ourselves fully and completely in any moment, in any situation, there wouldn't be enough of us, or there wouldn't be enough. If we went full on, somehow we'd run out of gas. Right? Because the idea is you're the only thing in the universe that is perpetually renewing, perpetually renewable. You're the only thing in the universe that has access to the infinite. So there's no way you could ever run out of gas. Anybody ever run out of gas in their car? How happy was your spouse when you ran out of gas? Right? So one of the things I want you to look at is that we're used to being in a finite world where everything runs out of gas at some point. And we have a belief that we could run out of gas. How many times have you said or you heard somebody else say, I'm burned out, right? And over again, we have this concept that we can get burned out, that we can actually use too much of ourselves. But really what's happening when we get burned out is that we're not really accessing the fullness of what we have. We're trying to do it out of our personality, out of our ego. And absolutely, as lovely as your personality and your ego is, it is not fully connected to your divine nature. So what I want us to begin to look at is if you're really working for God, then that requires that you call forth more that is within you. Call forth all that is within you to really express it and to just begin to play with what that really looks like. When I was in ministerial school, one of the common themes was people couldn't wait to get out of seminary so they'd get into a church so they could start making money, right? But before I got to ministerial school, before I got to seminary, I was the YOU coordinator. I worked with the teenage kids in Arizona and California and Las Vegas. And so I had been in and out of, I counted between 25 and 30 ministries, and hands-on, 25, 30 different ministries. So I saw most of the ministries in California, Arizona, and Las Vegas. And what was interesting to me is I was worried, right? I had seen ministry up close, and I knew there was a lot of skinny in ministry. Does that make sense? So my classmates were so excited to go out into the field because they thought, well, then they'll get a check and we'll be making money. I'm like, you haven't seen enough Unity churches, right? Because it's skinny out there. And my whole thing that I kept saying to people was, if you don't get it down here, you're not going to get it down over there. Like, if we don't get clear about our relationship with God here, well, we're safe in school where you get, people like, I had one church that was sponsoring my education, another church that was sending me a check, another church that was sending me a check every month. I was happy, right? It was good, right? And then you get out into the field, and it's like, woo! Because not many churches Unity churches look like this. True? Okay, great. Well, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So one of the things I began to do is say this affirmation. Because I knew that if I was going to be successful, I absolutely needed to know that God was my source. And I began to say, I am richly compensated by a loving, lavish universe for all the service that I render to the world. And that was my mantra. While I was in school, after I left school, that was my mantra, that the more I would give, the more I would be blessed, because that's spiritual principle. As you give, so shall you receive. So I began this as my mantra, that I am richly blessed by a loving, lavish universe for all the service that I render unto the world, because I wanted to get it in consciousness first before I went out into the world, because I knew that if I didn't get it where I was. How many of you have ever wanted to be saved by going to a new place? Right? How'd that work? Right? You actually end up taking yourself to the new place, right? Because the problem is not the old place. Guess where the problem is? It's in us, right? If we don't change in us, then we never really have the new experience that we're looking for. And if we're not connecting to the source, then everything gets a little weird. And so what would happen tonight if you unleash the full total of who you are? That you could actually be lovingly, lavishly blessed by a loving, lavish universe for all the service that you render into the world. That you could actually give yourself away in such a way that it would make a radical difference. And what I want you to hear is that I'm not talking about perfection. Right? Because perfection really is an element of the ego. Like the only concept that there is of perfection is in the ego that says, if I do it just right, then it will finally be good enough. then I'll finally be good enough. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about you unleashing the sum total of all the goodness that's within you and touching and experiencing your level of excellence in everything you do, and trusting that your excellence, as you fully give it to the universe, will come back to bless you in amazing and wonderful ways, in ways that you can't even imagine now. I know when I began to say that I am richly blessed by a loving, lavish universe for all the service that I render in the world. I was in ministerial school, and we got 2 gifts of all expenses trips when I was in school, right? And so we went skiing in Taos, and we went to Orlando to Disney World, both for 3 days, right? Like when you're a starving seminarian student, like having somebody pay your bill is fabulous, but then somebody to fly you across the country from Missouri was enormous, right? And so at that point, I understood that I was on to something, that it had to be generated from me, that it really was never about out there or their problem or their situation. It was in me. That I had to be willing to lay hold of the infinite reservoir that was in me, and trust that as I gave it in greater and greater ways, that I would be compensated for that. And the way that I began to draw this up is, imagine this is the level you're giving right now, right? And let's just say this is the level of blessing that you're receiving from it, right? Now, we're going to love this because we're giving this much and we're receiving this much, right? Who wouldn't love that, right? Does this look like a fair deal? Yeah, it looks like a very fair deal. So you're giving this much, the universe is giving back to you this much, and this much is just, this is free, okay? Now, what tends to happen, though, what usually happens is most people feel like they're giving this much, and the universe, because the universe tends to give back at the level we're giving, tends to be this. Now, this doesn't feel as much fun, right? Can you see that? Because then we start going into our story about, well, this and that, and I'm really giving more and this. And so what we begin to do is then we begin to pull back. And then what's the universe do? Pull back. And we get so mad, right? Because I'm giving you the best years of my life, right? So we go into our story, we go into our drama, we go into all this because we don't think it should be fair. We think it should always be like this. We think the universe should outgive us all the time, and that we don't have any responsibility to ever outgiving the universe. So if our employer, something happens, or in a relationship something happens, we get really upset if we don't think we're besting the universe all the time, okay? What I'm going to really invite you to do right now is actually do this. I want you to give at this level. I want you to give as big and in the fullness of who you are. And even if right now the universe is only giving back to you at this level, I want you to keep giving at that level. Right? Because this is our opportunity. Right? This is the opportunity for us to increase the blessing in our life, right? That as you give, so shall you receive. So if you're out giving the universe, can you imagine that the infinite intelligence of the universe is going to catch up? Now, it may be different than you think it may come from a different place or a different way, but if you outgive the universe, will the universe catch up and find a way to compensate you? Yes. Now, what the problem is, if you use this space for resentment, you just spent your blessing, right? And what we don't really want to acknowledge is how many times when we're out giving our life, when we're out giving the universe, we get resentful, and we don't want that really to count. We want to have our little secret resentments that nobody knows, right? And it never works like that, right? So one of the things I want you to really look at in your life is how are you being asked to outgive your current life experience? Before your life changes, before you get the better job or, win the lottery or anything, before anything changes, how are you being asked to expand your giving to the universe? And can you do it with excellence, not perfection? Right? Because the universe rewards excellence. There's a lot of people that will do things in a mediocre way, and they get a very small blessing from it. People that do things at the level of excellence get richly rewarded. And we want to pretend that we can't see the difference. And we call everything that we do sometimes, oh, that was excellent. Not. Right? It was okay. It was a half step above mediocre. But it wasn't the best. It wasn't excellent. Not perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect. But it has to call forth everything that's within your soul, everything that's within you, everything that you know that God has placed within you and wants to bring into the world as you, through you, and allow the infinite to express through you in ways that you've never really touched, right? The other thing that's so interesting for me is that most people, the way they're used to giving, there's usually a moment in your life, somewhere in your adulthood somewhere, where the way that you've been giving, the universe wants to more from you. And this usually we call as a crisis, right? So you've been going along giving the way you like to give. Maybe you're really good at it. Maybe it's just wonderful. But it's not the best. It's not all that you have within you. And you keep giving that way, thinking that should be enough, that that's the way you do it, and everything should be wonderful and hunky and dory. And so you keep giving the way you've always given, and then you get fired, or something happens, or there's a crisis, and you think, well, this is the way I always done it. But what I want you to begin to see is the universe actually expects you to evolve in your expression of your service to the world. That the way that you used to serve the world may not be enough anymore. Because there's more of you. There's more in you that you actually have to get to. So the way that you've been doing it is fabulous. But you know there's more. And so the way that you're being asked to serve the universe absolutely is probably being asked to evolve. And we hate that. Because our ego can do it the way we've done it. And it doesn't require a lot of us. We can just put it in gear and it just drives itself. But what if today you were willing to evolve in the way that you serve the universe? What if you were willing to do in a way that actually makes you feel vulnerable? Maybe even makes you feel afraid. Could you be willing to serve the planet not by the way you always have served the planet, but by the way your soul wants to serve the planet now? Could you be so vulnerable as to reinvent yourself for the next level of your life? Because I know there's a part of us that just wants to play the game out to the end. Like, I've been doing it for 30 years. Let's just play this out. It's like, well, okay, but what if you really came for this moment, not those moments? What if the last 30 years was preparing you for this moment where you're being called to be the next greatest version of yourself? What if this is where it really could get interesting for you in your life? What if you know that there's so much more in you that could actually be given birth to, that you could actually express? Would you be interested in that? See, spiritually, there's this challenge over and over again. In Matthew 5, we read it like this. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you, do not resist one who is evil. For if one strikes you on the right cheek, turn and also offer him your left. And if anyone sues you for his coat, also give him your cloak as well. And if one forces you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles with him. Give to him who begs, and do not refuse ones who want to borrow from you. For you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, you should love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. So there is this spiritual teaching, really at every level of life, that challenges us to take one more step, to go beyond what is customary or expected or regular or appropriate. How many of you like the word appropriate? Like, I gave it an appropriate level. Who says? Right? Because spiritually, what I want you to see is that all of us, because of our fears, have drawn a line with how much we think we can give. How much we think we can give in relationships, how much we think we can give in our work, how much we think is appropriate to give in our life. We've created this line. And you're right. Your ego has defined that as your line. And you get to have your line. But it's not spiritual. It's not of God. It's not, you can't get righteous approval on that one. It's just your story. And what I want you to see is that your ego really believes that your line is as far as you should go. And it's just not. That if you want to master life, if you want to master yourself, you have to go beyond that line and do it without resentment. Well, we don't even get resentment, right? I've got to go beyond what I know, and I don't even get to be resentful. I don't even get to have a story about it. I don't even get to have a little pity party, right? No. Like, here's the deal. You ready? I want you to tell yourself the truth. Where do you know that you're holding back? And I'm not saying that you need to work another 80 hours a week. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is, where do you know that you're not being the best version of you? Where you're holding back, where you're not expressing all that God is in you. And would you be willing this week to actually look at what that would look like? To actually make a commitment to live more of you, to bring more to the game, to, if you're at 50%, go to 80%. If you're at 60%, go to 100%. If you're at 20%, well then, stop. Right? Like, if you're at 20% and you're here in this room, stop. Right? Because there's so much of a bigger game that wants to be played. So where in your life do you know that you're just going through the motions? Is it in your relationship? Is it in your work? Is it with your family? Where do you know that you're just going through the motions, that you're not being the best version of you? And could you trust that if you brought the full sum total of who you are to that situation, that the universe would pay attention to that? That if you brought the full sum total of who you are into that situation, that the universe would begin to respond to you at the new level that you're giving. Well, Richard, I don't like it this way. I want the universe to give to me first, and then I'll kick up my service. Well, if you can get the universe to play that game, then go for it. The way it seems to work in my life is I have to prime the pump. I have to announce. I have to set the new vibration. I have to be the one that increases the giving. And if I increase my service to the universe rewards me amazingly. So where are you holding back? Where do you have a story that you can't go over the line? Where do you have a belief that if you play too much or give too much, that people will just take advantage of you or use you or abuse you or cast you aside? Where are you playing a game in life that just no longer works for you? Would you be willing to go over the line today? Did everybody hear me say go over the line today? Right? Did you hear me say that you need to go over the line and the only requirement is that you do it without resentments? Great, then I'm done. All right? And now you get to decide, right? Because it's not until you go over the line and tap into the infinite reservoir of God within you and do it without resentment that you actually find out how much God is in you. If you can do it through your personality, you are playing too small. Or if you're doing it with your charm, you're just playing too small. So where in your life have you drawn a beautiful little border? And maybe it has little flowers in it, right? Maybe there's a little white picket fence, and you've made it just a beautiful little border. Like, this is my line. I don't go over this line. I give it this level, right? And I can do this day and night. I can do this in my sleep. I can do this anytime because it doesn't really challenge me. That's the place where I want you to run over the daisies. Crush the wall and see if there's more God in you. Because you can't master life until you master yourself. And mastering yourself requires that you go beyond the self-imposed limits and see how much more God is in you. Are you willing to try? Okay, let's pray. I invite you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is right here, right now. And that today we give form and expression to the divine. We tap into the infinite reservoir of God's good, and we give it in a way with joy, with love in our heart, with a smile on our face. We give it for the full total of God that's in us. That we've been given by God an infinite life, infinite possibilities. And all that we're being asked of today is to give it away without resentment. Give it away without limit. Give it away without a story, without drama, without feeling victimized. To give it away. And to tap into more God than you've ever known before. So in the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen.